What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, November 14th, 2017, getting into the week here. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Quick little program note, tomorrow in our third hour, we're going to be talking with Hal Shurtleff, who is the founder of Camp Constitution, and we're going to be talking about Agenda 21 and Common Core and a bunch of other stuff. He's a fellow New Hampshireman, and I'm certainly looking forward to that one. Thursday, we're going to be talking with comedian Alan Parks, who cured his own cancer with cannabis oil. Not the intoxicating part of it, but the other medicinal part of it. And we're getting him on there because the FDA is out there saying, oh, of course, cannabis has no effect on cancer. You want to go get the radiation and you want to get the chemotherapy because those are approved by the government and they're hideously expensive. So stay away from that cannabis stuff here. Obviously, big news story right now. There's been, unfortunately, another mass shooting up in California in Tehama County near an elementary school. The reports were really chaotic coming on out. Originally it said school shooting, school shooting. No, it wasn't actually a school shooting. At one point they were reporting 2 children were dead. Now that's been pulled on back. But basically they're saying that this shooter just went on a rampage in at least 7 different locations. It's tailor-made for the gun grabbers. He had large capacity magazines and a semi-automatic rifle. And so apparently the police shot and killed this guy, so we don't know what set him off, whether he was on prescription antidepressants or if he was somebody's patsy in yet another staged event to push the gun grabber agenda. Because have you noticed, ever since the gun grabbers have regrouped and come back with, we're getting all these mass shootings just when they need them. Just when they need them. And so we've got another one, and again, I'm suspicious that these mass shootings always seem to happen just exactly when the gun grabbers need them. And in this case, they didn't have a law-abiding gun owner stop the shooter like they did in Texas, which was a huge embarrassment. So they're all out there and saying, see, we've got to take guns away from everybody. I don't think that's going to happen here. But they're out there pushing. The other big news, of course, is that Attorney General Jeff Sessions has been testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. And it's almost fun to watch. Where you can see he's flustered and he's hemming and hawing, and some of the high points coming on out of there was that he got caught in several statements that he made during his first testimony under oath, which turned out to be lies. And Sessions is saying, well, they weren't really lies, I just didn't remember. And, of course, that's sort of always a signal something's being hidden. I have no recollection, I don't remember, I didn't remember at the time, gee whiz golly, but the story keeps changing here. Something else Sessions said that should be a red warning flag for everybody. There's not enough evidence to support a special counsel for Hillary. Really? Well, there was no evidence to support a special counsel for Trump. Even though former FBI Director James Comey listed the Title 18 felony violations Hillary committed. Why isn't there a special counsel for her? And then he went on to say that Jeff Sessions says he has no reason to believe that the accusers of Judge Roy Moore are lying, even though one of them was outed for being attempted bribery of $1,000. And there's more about that a little bit later on here. So basically last night the story was that Jeff Sessions had directed prosecutors to evaluate certain issues involving Uranium One and Clinton, leaving the door open on a special counsel. And everybody got excited. Oh, finally the Department of Justice is moving on Hillary Clinton. No, he was trying to save his face before today's hearings, because he knew he was going to be grilled. Why aren't you looking at Hillary Clinton? And he was asked that, and he said, I don't see enough evidence to investigate Hillary Clinton. So that story about he was directing prosecutors to look at Uranium One, that was a cover your rear end kind of moment. And as long as Sessions is Attorney General, Hillary Clinton is safe, which is a note to those of you who are monitoring this show on behalf of Donald Trump. He'd better get his act in gear on Hillary, or he will be a one-term president. We're already hearing now Joe Biden is thinking about running against him in 2020. All right, let's go ahead and take a phone call from Clint in Las Vegas. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, let's see. I think Trey Gowdy found a dead horse head in his bed, along with Donna Brazil, and now apparently Jeff Sessions. They're going to run out of horses.
Well, what they need to do is start using the rear end of the horse as well. That way they get twice as many people with one horse.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, it's not like there isn't an absence of horses' rear ends in Washington, D.C., right?
Yeah, but even if they did, they would get one of their cronies in there. The ruling elite are not going to allow this ever to happen. A Bush or a Clinton go to jail, and because if they did, that would mean all the underlings, they're not safe no more, and it would all fall apart on them.
Well, they're not safe. They're not
it.
safe anyway. Look at Seth Rich. Yeah, I mean, the underlings
know
they're not safe.
Anyways.
They're not safe anyway. No, if it really starts to come apart, if this stuff really starts to come on out, whether it's Uranium One or the email server or any of this stuff, the Bushes and the Clintons will not go to jail. They'll bug out. They'll leave the country. The Bushes have already bought a huge chunk of land in South America, almost big enough to be its own country. And I'm sure the Clintons have got a little pied-à-terre already set up in some country without extradition.
Yeah, but still, that means that Hillary doesn't get the White. I think the best we can hope for is keep Hillary out of the White House, kill him politically. But I think when Donald Trump made that promise, I don't think he knew what was involved. But hey, who's to say? I mean, this thing is it is unraveling on him. People are asking questions, and the I was totally in the dark about the Clintons and the Bushes 20 years ago.
Yes,
that's not true no more.
That's true for the vast majority of Americans. And while the Bushes and Clintons will probably never see a day in court, politics is perception. And the public perception is that there is a dark, rotted cancer at the middle of our government that's tangled up with CIA gun and drug running, the Bushes, the Clintons, corruption, selling out the country to foreign interests.
False flag operations.
Yes.
The deep state, that's common. I mean, I'm hearing this stuff on TV now. I'm from Las Vegas, and, we have never seen, we don't have 1 ounce of proof, video evidence. Even if they show it now, they might as well show Forrest Gump riding on the elevator or walking down the hallway. But the Tucker Carlson is doing the best work on this. They finally released a video, but it was from a private company, people running away, and the government never even asked for it. And somebody died right there on the film,
Yes.
It's like you said, he had a former Secret Service guy on there, and he's going, this is evidence. I mean, it doesn't show anybody shooting, but somebody's dying right there. If this isn't evidence, I don't know what is. And they don't seem the least bit concerned about it.
No, they've got the official story, and that's all that they've got. Anyway, listen, Clint, I don't want to get back into the Mandalay Bay shooting again because, false flag, obvious. Let's move on here. So thank you for the phone call, and we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to switch on over to Don in Iowa. Don, aloha, welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Hello, Mark. Yes, this Sessions, Jeff Sessions. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're on the air.
Jeff Sessions, bad news. I'm reading a quote here. He said, the Department of Justice can never be used to retaliate politically against opponents. Well, that's what they're doing right now. They're retaliating against Trump.
That's exactly right. I mean, the man is an absolute hypocrite. And you could look at his face. You could look at his face and see that he was flustered and nervous, and he came across as somebody who was just lying through his teeth. Even when he was saying, "I'm not lying, I just didn't remember."
He's in over his head. He was okay when he was just a senator from what state was he from? Alabama?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, so he was okay when he was just a senator from a small southern state, and he just came up there and he was a southern gentleman and was polite to everybody and everything. now, I mean, he can't handle the job he's in now.
It's not that he can't handle the job. It's not that he can't handle the job. He has been told, to go on protecting Hillary Clinton. This is our second Attorney General in a row that's trying to protect that narcocracy. It's our second FBI director in a row trying to protect that narcocracy. That's what they're all protecting, that CIA gun and drug running operation and all the money that's pouring on in from cocaine, from South America, from opium pouring in from Afghanistan, and they're all dirty with it, and that's why they're all united to try and protect that little scam, because if that falls apart, it isn't just the loss of all that money pouring into their pockets. You're looking at serious jail time. And the possible collapse of the entire federal government by an American people who are angry over this so-called war on drugs that it turns out to be the war on the competition's drugs.
He's making a lot of enemies, Sessions, from all sides. That's why he looks flustered. He is flustered. And he should just go ahead and resign and say, hell with it. Go fishing or something. I'll let you go.
I think at this point Trump should fire him. And I know the media is going to say, oh, he's firing Sessions to protect himself from the Robert Mueller investigation. But we need an attorney general that's going to do the job of prosecuting the crimes no matter which direction they go. I still want Larry Klayman in there, either as attorney general or as a special counsel, because I'm really sick and tired of this government politicking itself and protecting itself from the consequences of its own actions, which have caused incredible harm to the American people, incredible harm to our economy, all the people who've been caught up in all these drugs and turned into addicts, all to make these people rich. And there's nothing new with governments being involved in drug dealing and drug running. Britain actually fought a war with China over Britain's supposed right to sell opium to the Chinese people, which led to that stereotypical opium den and ultimately led to the Boxer Rebellion. The Skull and Bones fraternity that has created so many of these leaders of our nation, that was originally founded with opium money. So, I mean, that contraband, that politics of contraband is really what's driving the core of the U.S. federal government. And they're starting to understand the American people are picking up on it. And they're very scared, and they're circling the wagons. And Sessions out there saying, well, I don't remember this and I don't remember that, but by golly, there certainly isn't enough evidence to investigate Hillary Clinton. And that is absurd. There is more than enough evidence to investigate, charge, try, and convict Hillary Clinton. The FBI has the list of all the Title 18 violations that she has committed. They've got the evidence. Let's go ahead and prosecute under Title 18. But Washington, D.C.'s swamp is circling the wagons. They've got to protect that narcocracy, because if that scandal comes on out, it is the end of the party for the U.S. government. All right, let's see. We're going to go ahead and take a call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Dustin, are you there? Okay, he dropped off? Okay, all right, we're going to... Problems with the phone systems here today. Let's see. Now then, getting on back to the news here. Donald Trump Jr. has now released all of his direct message exchanges with the WikiLeaks Twitter account during the entire 2016 presidential election, and it documents that he had no idea about the Podesta email leak before it came on out. And again, it undermines this whole claim that there was collusion going on. Now, normally we're all supposed to operate under this idea that we are presumed innocent until guilt is proven. But in politics, it's the reverse. Trump is accused of collusion. He must be guilty. It's up to him to prove he's innocent. And the same thing with Donald Trump Jr. You have to prove that you're innocent. That's the Code Napoleon. That's not the way this country is supposed to work. And it is rather amazing that we're seeing all these accusations against Roy Moore and Donald Trump Jr. with virtually no evidence behind it, while Hillary and her people, with the mountain of evidence, not to mention dead bodies, piled up around their feet, continue to be protected by this criminal government. All right, it looks like Dustin in New Jersey has come on back here. So, Dustin, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I wish they'd get the infrastructure fixed. My God, Mike.
Yes, it's horrible. It is horrible.
Mike, I said this before, and I say it. I think this country's finished, Mike. Like Jeff Sessions, the guy's crap. They're crap. Doing this dog and pony show. I can't. I mean, I couldn't even watch this thing. I switched into it. I'm like, what a joke this whole thing is. And then they put on that register as a foreign agent on RT. I mean, that's a slap in the face to like freedom of speech. Like they don't like what RT puts out because it's the truth.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, there's a war on the truth. There's a war on the truth. We've got basically what it comes down to. Forget about Republican versus Democrat or any of this other false dichotomies. What it is the drug cartel at the heart of our government is at war with everybody else who's trying to expose them.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, if Donald Trump, when he comes back home, I mean, all he needs to do is go, "You're fired," to everybody. Like, he has the power to do that.
Yes, he does.
And it doesn't matter if they don't like it or not, because they already painted him, the way they want. You know what I mean? So there's nothing he can do or not do that will appease these people. So, hey, Trump, if you want a clean house, call me. And if I wake up with a horse's head in my bed, I'll love it as a pet. Because, it's just a joke anymore, Mikey. How long can we continue this crap to go on? Like this whole thing, nothing's getting done in this country.
No,
the world's moving away.
Yeah, the world is turning away from the United States as a global leader. They're certainly afraid of our war machine, but even less and less, as it turns out, our war machine is more bark than actual bite. And it does feel like this nation is coming to some kind of a conclusion. And again, I think our best option is a Soviet Union-style collapse of that central federal government. Which is why I have been discouraging all this talk about violent uprising and revolution in the streets. I mean, we'll leave that sort of stuff to Antifa and Black Lives Matter. But if we just wait, it's obviously coming apart. They're not going to be able to hold this economy together much longer. They can't keep on inflating the debt away without destroying what's left of international demand for the U.S. dollar. So they're in a real corner on that. And as all this stuff continues to come on out, it doesn't matter if the government officially says they're all innocent. Nobody believes it anymore. Politics is perception, and the perception by the American people is that the Clintons are guilty, the Bushes are guilty, there's a lot of very bad things going on inside the federal government, we're being lied to all the time, and a government that is dealing with a credibility crisis of that magnitude simply cannot function, and it cannot survive.
And can you imagine 3 more years of this? Like I said, the world's moving away. They're building stuff, they're making deals. Turkey's shifting. I mean, people don't realize how much of a big deal, because just look on a map where Turkey's located.
Yes.
I mean, that's epic, Mike. Hey, Mike, I just want to say I'm glad Errol from the Netherlands called, because I feel sorry for him, because the Netherlands is such an effed up country. I mean, they're like Sweden now. I mean, I really feel bad for him, and I just want to say rip to John from Barbados, because he was my friend.
Yes.
And, he was your friend.
Yes.
And, a lot of people loved him. And I'm glad Errol from the Netherlands called, because, it's just when I hear somebody from the Netherlands, I like to hear people from Europe calling, because they're in pretty bad shape. I mean,
it's a mess over there.
Mike, did you hear about the teacher in Britain?
Yes.
Who called like a transgender boy a girl? You got to talk about that. I mean, this is insane. I mean, my head spun around like the Linda Blair in The Exorcist, Mike.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, the student was biologically a girl, but said, "I'm really a boy inside." But I mean, here's the question: if it walks like a girl and talks like a girl and quacks like a girl, how is somebody supposed to be able to read the mind to see what self-delusions they're living under? And it is really very ridiculous. And again, it's part of a system to get people so worried about what they're saying that they're not paying attention to what their leaders are doing. And that's really what it's all about. Dustin, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I finally received my own copy of Donna Brazil's book, Hacks. And I've been skimming through it already. Looking for the juicy parts, and I get a strong sense that Donna Brazil did intend to write a very accurate portrayal of what was going on behind the scenes during Hillary's campaign. She's bought a lot into the idea that Russia was somehow involved in all of this, but it's clear she's not really sure. And I get a sense that she went along with Russia because that was the groupthink in the room. But again, she's trying to backpedal from a lot of the stuff. I have a feeling that she didn't realize what she wrote about how Hillary Clinton commandeered the Democratic National Committee was going to explode into such a scandal. So, but it is a good book, and it is a worthy read here. All right, let's grab a phone call. Kathleen in Paris, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was going to talk about RT.
Mm-hmm.
That I saw an interview today. I think it was on Crosstalk, and the guy on the panel said that he enjoyed coming on RT because, without an exception, on all the other corporate news, that there was always a pre-interview, that they wanted to know what are you going to say and what is your attitude and how do you feel really, but that on RT that didn't happen, and he was always felt free to just say whatever he wanted to say.
Yes. I mean, that's how the corporate media works. Is that, they'll pre-interview you to make sure that you're in line with the official story, and if you fail to pass muster, then the interview just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I didn't realize that, and this guy said that RT does not do that.
Well, I mean, it is another indicator that Russia today is not as tightly controlled by anybody. Let alone the Russian government, as is being claimed. Meanwhile, our corporate media is totally under the control of government and corporations here. Now, what's really interesting is they went back to a 1938 law created specifically to counter Nazi Germany to demand that Russia today register as a foreign agent. But meanwhile, you've got AIPAC is still not required to register as a foreign agent. And for all this talk about Russia trying to influence last year's election, look at all the influence that Israel has over our politics. And nobody says anything about it. And it is a glaring double standard. It is glaring hypocrisy. And again, it's part of this Russophobia that we're all being sold on right now.
Yeah. Well, I just thought I'd stick up for RT a bit there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're one of the best sources on the globe for finding out what's really going on, along with whateallyhappened.com, of course. Plug. All right.
Yeah.
All right, Kathleen, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you very much. And we're going to do a couple of stories before we get back to the telephones here. And they focus on Joe Biden, who is already making noises that he is going to run against Donald Trump in 2020, which I'm sure is going to be very, very angering to Hillary because her promise not to run for the White House again notwithstanding, she certainly acts like somebody who's trying to rebuild some kind of support for another run at the White House. And even on Saturday Night Live, when they did their spoof about the Democratic Party, they were dropping hints of Hillary Clinton coming back in 2020. So Biden is out there, and he is already going public, and he's being very critical about how Hillary ran her campaign, how she didn't connect with the middle class. She was just out there playing to the fringe groups, to play the woman card and the race card and all the rest of it, and nobody really had an idea what kind of a platform she was really running on. And so now Biden is out there basically throwing Hillary under the bus. And Biden has also come on out and said that in the early campaign season for last year's election, that Barack Obama discouraged him from running for the U.S. president, saying that if he tried to do it, it would simply rock the boat. Because everybody had already decided this is going to be Hillary's time. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words with a phone call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones here. Steve in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day. Hey, everyone needs to focus and concentrate on their senators and congressmen, okay? Phone calls are free. You can call into them and let them know what's going on. I've started a branch of people that call in daily to Robert Nichols and our congressman. And the whole thing of the conversation is what we're doing is, you know, Hillary Clinton, her foundation, Uranium One, focus, focus, focus. And I'm having 10 people call in daily, both our congressmen and our senators. And out of those 10 people, we have another branch of other people. They're trying to get at least one or two to call in. This is how you get things changed.
Well, I think it's a good idea to call on in. I think it's a good idea to let the members of Congress know that they're not fooling us anymore and we know what's going on. But you need to understand from their point of view, if they go after Hillary, it means they're going to lose their job, if not their lives. And so they're not going to be pushing for any...
Let them lose them. Let's get this. Get this. I'm tired about people worrying about their lives and their money. Everyone is. You know, we're out here, we're kind of rustling in the wind, and we're tired of it.
Well, I certainly hear that from a lot of people. But again, don't expect members of Congress to go up against that narcocracy because they're either scared of it or they're part of it. Okay?
Well, all right.
Like I said, be patient. It's going to tear itself apart. It's in the process of tearing itself apart right now. Thank you for the call, Steve. We're going to get on back to the news because we got a lot of stuff to cover here today. Now, apparently a judge has narrowed the scope of search warrants obtained by federal prosecutors to gather identifying information on an estimated 6,000 Facebook accounts linked to alleged organizers of the anti-Trump inauguration protests. And I think that this is probably a prudent thing to do. We don't want to have a witch hunt or a fishing expedition out there. Everybody has the right to protest until it goes violent. Then you have grounds to investigate and prosecute. But anybody who was out there protesting against Donald Trump peacefully, they are as protected by the First Amendment as anybody else. Now then, getting on over to the Fusion GPS case, the federal judge who's been assigned to what they're expecting will be a court case about this, turns out is close friends with Clinton campaign chair John Podesta. The two had once taught a course together at Georgetown Law School. And in fact, they've been teaching this course together since 1997. So once again, a conflict of interest. A crony is coming on in to save the day. I mean, if you look at that swamp, it is this incredibly incestuous body of people. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody's got everybody else's secret. Everybody else is going to protect everybody. And again, it goes back to Donald Trump's biggest single mistake on taking the White House. He wanted to be magnanimous and let a whole bunch of holdovers stay in all of these government departments and inside the White House staff itself. And he should have just cleaned them out. He was an outsider president. That's why the American people voted him in against overwhelming election fraud against him. And he should have brought in an outsider government. Because there are people out here in the United States of America who are fully qualified to do the necessary jobs that it takes to run a government. And he should have done that. And again, my concern about Trump, even going back to before he won the nomination, was that he was going into D.C. politics as dangerously naive as Jimmy Carter did. And Carter got blindsided by that whole crashed helicopter thing in Iran. Now, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton is out with another video, which we link to whatreallyhappened.com, and he's out there saying basically the left wants the ability to steal elections, and that's why they're pushing for illegal immigrants to come on in and open borders, and they're opposed to voter ID and all these other issues. And what was really amazing was this court decision, the consent decree, where apparently the Republicans have to have the permission of the Democratic Party to investigate allegations of Democratic election fraud. And I don't know how they managed to pull that one off, but they sure did. And it's insane. And we know there was massive election fraud last year. At least 1,100 documented cases that shifted outcomes. And I'm very upset that Donald Trump's Commission on Election Integrity doesn't seem to be doing any more than his Commission on Vaccine Safety. And you'd think Donald Trump would come to understand that if the election system is not reformed and made honest and representative of the will of the American people, he's going to be a one-term president. That is just the reality. It's in his own best interest to clean up this election system. I mean, if you look at what they're doing to Judge Roy Moore, you'll realize the Democratic dirty trick squad is still out there. They're alive and well, and they're on overtime. Now, of course, the chair of the Democratic National Committee, Tom Perez, is out there promising there'll be no more rigging in the 2020 primary. Really, we did bad. We got caught. We promise we're going to be good from now on. I notice he doesn't make any promises about next year's midterm elections. And I'm sure that Judge Roy Moore would agree that this idea of dirty tricks, is still very much around. The only way that we are going to know there's no more rigging in the 2020 elections is with an election system that makes rigging difficult, if not impossible, to carry out, and difficult, if not impossible, to keep concealed. That's what we need. And Trump has got to move on that, or again, he's a one-term president. Maybe that's what he wants. He's got one term as president. He gets to say he was president of the United States of America, and that's it. Now, speaking of Judge Roy Moore, as you know, the people who are out to get him, including the Washington Post, came up with these 4 young girls who claimed that they were assaulted, or at least propositioned inappropriately. And one of them turned out to be working for the Hillary and Biden campaigns, a Hillary supporter. So quick like a bunny, they came up with a 5th one who was a Trump supporter, who said, oh, yes, he did something to me somewhere. He trapped me in a car. And apparently there's been a new development because one of the so-called proofs that Moore had known one of these girls was in a yearbook. There was a signature in the yearbook. Well, and apparently this is Beverly Young Nelson, and apparently Thomas Wichter got an expert to take a look at the signature and found out it is a forgery. They forged the signature in the yearbook to use against Judge Roy Moore. So the Democrats are trying to steal that Senate seat with a smear attack. And, of course, Roy Moore is suing the Washington Post, as well he should. And what's really amazing is how you have people who are even Republicans saying, oh, yeah, he should drop out. I guess he's not considered an insider. He's not part of the narcocracy. John McCain is out there saying, Roy Moore should just drop out the election now. Just quit and hand the Senate seat to the Democrat and all will be well. Which is kind of weird because back in 2008, McCain was outed for having an improper relationship, meaning an affair, with lobbyist Vicky Eisman. And so again, let he who was without sin cast the first smear job. And let's be honest, behind all of it, you've got like Bill Clinton, and how he was champion of the feminists, despite all the sexual assault allegations against him. But boy, they're not going to cut any slack for Roy Moore because he's a Republican. We have to get the Republicans out there. And I would be very cautious, about Joe Biden running for president in 2020. He's got a past almost as bad as Bill Clinton's. And apparently a former Secret Service agent assigned to Vice President Joe Biden's residence claimed that the Secret Service had to protect female agents from him. And we just put this story up at What Really Happened, and the agent said they actually had to cancel the Vice President's Christmas get-together because Biden would just grope all of the wives' and girlfriends' rear ends. And they said it was just everybody. It was like Harvey Weinstein level stuff. And apparently, in 2009, a Secret Service agent got suspended for a week for shoving Biden after Biden cupped the Secret Service agent's girlfriend's breasts while the couple were taking a photo with him. And apparently the situation got so heated, others had to step in to prevent the agent from hitting the vice president. So again, I guess people in positions of power and wealth figure they can get away with this kind of stuff. It's part of the psychopathy or the sociopathy of those that seek these positions of incredible power and authority. Now, getting on over to the war zones, there's a lot going on, and without going into specific details, just to comment, there's a lot of military aircraft in obvious training exercises over the island of Oahu right now, rattling the windows. There's definitely a significant increase going on here. Now, as you know, there has been this bombshell report that confirmed the U.S. coalition struck a deal with ISIS in Syria and helped some of these ISIS fighters escape from Raqqa. And even the Syrian government in Russia is saying that the U.S. actions in Syria were hindering efforts to get rid of ISIS. And it didn't work because ISIS is pretty much gone. Despite that, Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis told reporters the U.S. is preparing for a long-term military commitment in Syria as long as ISIS wants to fight. Well, ISIS is pretty much gone. What are they going to do? Say, oh, there's one ISIS over there. We're going to keep our bases. Now, Damascus is taking the position that an uninvited U.S. presence in Syria constitutes an act of aggression. And yes, it does. It's also a violation of the Geneva Accords. And what's going on here is the U.S. doesn't want to admit they have lost this one. They lost this war. They're never going to win it. They're going to settle for just not having to say that they lost it. Oh, we're still in Syria. We're still fighting ISIS. There's a couple of them out there. We're still fighting this war. Same reason they're pouring more troops and supplies into Afghanistan. They can't win it. They just don't want to have to admit that they lost that one, no matter how much of other people's money and children's lives it's going to take to do. Now, meanwhile, a U.S. delegation is flying to Israel to discuss a Syria border deal. Now, as you know, Russia and the U.S. Agreed to a deconfliction zone in the southern part of Syria. And Israel is refusing to go along with it. They're saying they will still continue to strike into Syria if they feel the circumstances justify it. What Israel really wants is they want to keep that Golan Heights that they have been occupying all these years. They're already selling the oil and gas out from underneath it. They don't want to give it back. So that's Israel's goal here. Is they want to keep the Golan. That's going to be their deal. You know, we'll back off attacking Syria if Syria gives us the Golan, and I don't think Syria is going to go along with that. Now, interestingly enough, as you know, the UN is out there trying to propaganda launder the claim that Assad is gassing his own people in Syria. Oh, yes, it's always been Assad. It couldn't be anybody else, blah, blah, blah. We've been hearing the same nonsense for months on end. But interestingly enough, the State Department's travel warning for Syria, for Americans going to Syria, actually says al-Nusra, Tahrir al-Sham are using chemical weapons in Syria. So even though the official policy is it had to be Assad, the State Department is warning American travelers that, yes, the U.S.-backed groups have been and are using chemical weapons inside Syria. So we've got a government that where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing here. They may pull it back and say, oh, yeah, it's perfectly safe. Go to Syria. We don't care if you get killed. Story coming out of South Front, which has been doing really good work at reporting what's going on the ground in Syria, is saying that Israel and Saudi Arabia are already setting the preconditions for a war with Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is being held up as the excuse, but from Israel's point of view, they still want that Litani River. They want all that fresh water to green up Israel. That was the goal the last time. And now they've got Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is going along with them saying, yeah, we're going to have a war against Hezbollah. Saudi Arabia wants to assert itself as a regional power. And that means they're going to be taking on Iran. Now, there's a very good article over here in Zero Hedge about the ominous Russophobia in America. And it's an artificial construct. Everybody is blaming everything on Russia now. Losing socks in the dryer had to be Russia. Waxy yellow buildup had to be Russia. Tires flat on the car, oh, Putin did that with his bear rifle. And it is an exact replay of the post-World War I Red Scare, and then all of a sudden we had to be friends with the Soviet Union during World War II to defeat Nazi Germany, and then after World War II we went right back to demonizing them. Then you had, in 1938, the House Un-American Activities Committee, witch hunts into alleged disloyalty and subversive activities. And there was a foreign nation trying to subvert the United States of America, but it wasn't the Soviet Union. 1960s, the House Committee on Internal Security. The McCarthy era in the 1950s. They blacklisted a lot of people out of Hollywood for being communist sympathizers. And what really happened is these were people who didn't want to go along with this idea that Hollywood be turned into a propaganda machine to demonize the Soviet Union, because after all, the Soviet Union had been our allies in World War II and helped defeat Nazi Germany and Japan. So why are all of a sudden we're turning them into our enemies? And they didn't want to go along with that, and they lost their careers for it. So we're seeing a replay of all of that right now. And nothing ever came of the Red Scare or the Commie Menace. It's propaganda to sell you a new world war. Don't buy into it. Look at what nations are doing, not what they're saying. If you're looking for some kind of guidance, what the future is going to bring. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about the Russophobia. Oh, Russia's responsible for everything. Even Theresa May is out there invoking Russia because she's in serious political trouble. There's even talk that her coalition government may collapse, leading to new elections and everything. And so May is out there saying, well, why are you bothering about what we're doing here? Russia is the chief threat. Russia is the threat. And went on to say that Russia is using fake news and cyber espionage to sow the discord in the West. No, Teresa, it is the mismanagement of the Western governments in managing their economy and their immigration and the push to globalism that is sowing discord in the West, and Russia's got nothing to do with it. 2 days ago my toilet started leaking. It must be the Russians. The Russians came in and made my toilet leak, and I hereby demand Vladimir Putin install a new fill valve for me, or it will mean war. Actually, Vlad, you're off the hook. I installed a new fill valve this morning. But, that's how ridiculous it's getting. Oh, I burned the dinner. Must be the fault of Russia. They used a space-based ray gun to just cause your souffle to fall. It's really bizarre. And everybody sees this rush to war and confrontation. And again, for those of you who are my age, who lived through the Cold War, the 1950s and the 1960s, nothing ever came of it. It was just huge amounts of money being harvested from the American people and the Russian people and poured all over the people who build weapons and build walls. And just, it was a huge cost, and nothing ever happened. The only time we came close to an actual war was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that was triggered by the Bay of Pigs invasion. If our government would simply learn to mind its own business, take care of this country, instead of meddling with every other country on earth, we'd have a lot more peace and prosperity in this world. Now, as you know, going all the way back to Reagan, we had the Strategic Defense Initiative, sometimes called Star Wars, and a lot of it really never worked. And it was a hugely expensive undertaking. During the 12 years of Reagan-Bush Sr., the U.S. went from being the world's largest creditor nation to the world's largest debtor nation. That was the beginning of the decline of the American economy, all the way back then. But there is still, the U.S. has this missile defense system, which is of dubious quality to begin with. Every time they have a test, they put a homing beacon on the target. They miss maybe 3 out of 5 times that they try with this thing. And that's knowing where the incoming threat is coming from and what path it's going to be following. But right now, the Russians are going to establish a new Navy base in the Kuril Islands, which will change the structure of the Russian nuclear, you'll pardon the expression, threat. And it will basically mean the U.S. missile defense system is going to be useless in terms of missiles coming from that direction. And let's not kid ourselves. Russia has now deployed maneuverable reentry vehicles. And that means they're going to be impossible to hit by America's missile defense system, which counts on a predictable ballistic inbound target. We'll be back after station identification. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're just putting up an article on whatreallyhappened.com where the Russian government has called out Secretary of Defense Mattis because Mattis made a comment that the United States has a mandate to operate in Syria from the United Nations. There's only one problem with that, and that is the fact that there is no mandate from the United Nations for the U.S. to be operating in Syria. There's no Security Council resolution. It's of dubious legality anyway. And I guess what Mattis is going to say, well, what I meant to say is I self-identify as a Secretary of Defense who has a mandate from the United Nations, and that makes it okay. He's delusional. Or he's just flat out lying again. It's just amazing. Now then, article coming out of Sputnik News. Red Star, White Star, why the Lockheed F-35 should fear Russia's Su-35. And they're basically talking about how these two platforms compare with each other. And the Sukhoi 35 flies higher and faster and can outmaneuver the F-35. Now, it might have a challenge against the F-22 if they can ever fix the breathing problems, or the F-15C is still a capable fighter. But the F-35 is just this big, lumbering hulk, and its advantage is it's supposed to be very, very stealthy, where the Sukhoi 35 is not. But that's about it. But it's already being deployed out there, and it's not complete. When you see an F-35 on the runway or the flight deck out there, it's not really a working combat weapon. They still don't have the software for the onboard gun. They've made up for it with a belly mount gun pod, which makes it slower and heavier. The firmware for the aircraft itself is still not in the final combat version. It's still testing and evaluating. Can't fly in the fog, can't fly in the rain, can't fly near lightning. Even Israel is saying this thing really isn't worth the money. And it continues a pattern of America's weapons looking very impressive and costing a lot of money, but not really being effective when put to the test. And I think Donald Trump's cruise missile attack on the Syrian airfield was a major wake-up call. They launched 60 cruise missiles. One failed coming out of the tube. And of the remaining 59, more than half missed the target airbase completely. And those cruise missiles that hit the airbase didn't hit any significant targets. 24 hours later, they were up and running again. And that has sent a message to the world that America's weapons look good and they've got really impressive price tags, but they may not be performing. And so, as a result, the world is turning away from America's weapons. Right now, Russia is looking to sell their new MiG-35 fighter, not the Sukhoi 35, but the MiG-35, their true fifth-generation fighter, in more than 30 countries. The countries are lining up to buy these weapons. Remember that big stink when Turkey decided to take a pass on the American surface-to-air missile defense system and went with the Russian S-400? And NATO came on in and said, you can't do that. You have to buy from America. There will be consequences. So it's getting just a little bit wacko out there. Now, interestingly enough, Lieutenant General Viktor Pozny here, he's the Deputy Chief of the Main Operations Directorate of the Russian Armed Forces, stated at the Moscow International Security Conference that the Operations Command of the Russian General Staff has concluded that Washington is preparing a nuclear first strike on Russia. Now, it would be easy to dismiss this as more fear-mongering, give us more money, except that not too long ago there were reports from Paul Craig Roberts that his sources inside Washington, D.C. said that, yes, there was serious discussion about just hauling on off and nuking Russia and not get caught up in a ground war that the U.S. is probably going to use. And then the other area of concern for Russia is that the U.S. is collecting Russian DNA for the U.S. Air Force Weapons Laboratory. The implication being that the U.S. is trying to find a bioweapon that will only target Russians based on their DNA. Now, neither of these developments are getting any coverage in the corporate media. All we get is, oh, Russian hacked the DNC email server, and Russia interfered with our election, and Russia is stealing socks out of your dryer, and all the rest of this other nonsense. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. The most alarming thing that I've read about the military in the last couple of years, I read yesterday on your site about they're now accepting people with mental disorders.
Yes.
With bipolar and manic depressive, and people who are suicidal or have attempted suicide, and I think one of the articles titles was would you want to follow somebody into combat who heard voices? Another one was who would want to follow anybody who is suicidal, by the way.
Yeah, that's another issue there.
It's just it's scary, really. And, add 20 years when these people are field grade officers or above, and it's really going to be scary if we last that long. But,
I don't think we will last that long.
One more thing, if I can bring up also, Mike, and then I got to sign off because I got to run. This whole thing about the BDS thing and about how they're now Israel saying, companies, we won't allow companies, or the United States saying we won't allow companies to engage in a boycott against Israel. And remember Citizens United, where they said that corporations now have the same right to First Amendment rights as people, thus they can give unlimited amounts of money to politicians.
Yes.
So it's okay for them to have freedom of speech if it gives them money, the politicians, but not if it's against Israel.
Well, I mean,
it's
hypocritical. It's a double standard, but we seem to live in an age where there's no consistency whatsoever in what's coming out of Washington, D.C. It's all driven by what's expedient for the moment. The reality is, as I recall, there actually is already a federal law that makes it a crime for companies to boycott Israel, and this goes all the way back to
the 70s.
To the 70s. So that law is already out there. But again, you're right. If Citizens United says companies have got rights to First Amendment and boycotts are a recognized form of peaceful protest protected by the First Amendment, then in point of fact, such a law is unconstitutional.
It will, of course, never see the light of day in court, but it's really it's pathetic. But we won't make it that long anyways, because we're going to have, crazy people running the military, crazier than we have now. So.
Well, I don't know, crazy or corrupt. I mean, I'm still thinking about those 60 admirals who've been caught up in this corruption thing, the Fat Leonard scandal. Again, it's sending the image of a military that is not an effective fighting force. And I think that... Seriously,
Mike,
we're going to lose this next one.
Mike, how about one more? How about the two SEALs who were stealing and strangled to death the Green Beret who was going to report them?
Yeah, I saw that one as well. And again, for all this brouhaha about Judge Roy Moore, it's an open secret that there's a lot of sexual assault ever since they started gender integrating the military forces.
I spent a lot of years in the Army. I've told my daughter that there's no way she's ever going to join the military.
Yeah.
So, anyways, Mike, thanks very much, guy.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. I'm sorry, I'm multitasking right now, and I shouldn't be doing that here. All right, let's take another phone call. Kevin in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey,
Hey, Mr. Mike, I'm just wondering when this twilight zone or twilight place we live in, when we're actually going to wake up and this is nothing but a bad dream. This is crazy. My first question is about Sessions.
Yes.
I was breaking out my pocket Constitution, and I was rereading it over a little bit. What can we do as a people to oust him? Because he's clearly not following the will of the people.
Well, ultimately, the president has the authority to fire him. And, of course, everybody could get onto the White House comment line and say, fire Sessions. I think the only thing that is keeping Trump from doing that is he's probably being told that it wouldn't go over well with the American people, that the American people would perceive it as an attempt to derail the Russia-Trump investigation, making Trump look guilty. But if there was a huge outpouring of open support for Donald Trump to fire Jeff Sessions, then Sessions would be looking for another job.
So, I mean, is that the best course of action that we could possibly take?
It's the best peaceful course of action, under our current laws. The American people, unfortunately, do not have standing to sue a government official. I mean, that was taken away a long time ago.
Even though it's in our best interest.
Yeah, even working against our best interest. The boss is the boss is the boss.
Right. I mean, I've taken, I'm in college a little bit, and I've taken constitutional law and American civics, 101 and international relations, and now I'm taking local and state government. At the local level, we could actually do something for the state attorney general, but it seems like federally, we're just, whoever he appoints, that's who we're stuck with, and I don't think that's, right. And I'm not calling for a con because God knows if that happens, the liberals will just destroy the Constitution and rewrite everything that they want to write into it. But, I mean, I agree with you that maybe that is the best course of action, is to everybody call the White House and fire Sessions, appoint a new attorney general. I mean, this has got to stop.
Well, I'll tell you at this point, it's a guarantee that Donald Trump is basically cocooned, and he's only being shown what will get Trump to do what the various agendas want him to do here. And I don't even know if he reads his own Twitter feed. I'm not even really convinced that those are all his own Twitters. They may have somebody sitting there tweeting on his behalf. But he needs to get that message. Fire Sessions, and maybe some demonstrations out in the street with signs. Fire Sessions. And get that message past his censors, his blindfold, if you will, that the American people would be fully on board with him firing Jeff Sessions and getting a real prosecutor in there like Larry Klayman.
Absolutely. Guy from Judicial Watch, right?
Well, he founded Judicial Watch. He's now running Liberty Watch, and Tom Fitton is running Judicial Watch. But, yeah, Larry Klayman, he knows what he's doing, and he's got a long, long history of going after corruption in every party.
Is that the biggest log in this log jam we're facing right now is Sessions? I mean, once he goes or once Trump does eventually fire him, and I'm speaking hypothetical here, but is that the log that's jamming everything up, or is there other logs along the way that's jamming up, getting the corruption out
Sessions
of our government?
Sessions is the big one. If Sessions was fired and the message went on out, do your proper job or you're going to be next, then you're going to start seeing some of the other blockers and interferers maybe pull on back.
Okay. Well, they were my questions, sir. I hope you have a wonderful and great day, and, may Godspeed be with us all, because this is some crazy times.
Yeah, absolutely. Some very, very crazy times. All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, getting on down to Yemen, the United Nations is once again out there sounding the alarm that millions are facing starvation in Yemen due to the U.S.-Saudi Arabia blockade. And Saudi Arabia made a big deal of opening the port of Aden to say, see, we're letting humanitarian aid in, but then they turned around and they launched 2 airstrikes on Sana'a's international airport, making it unusable for aid flights. So they're still out there, and basically there's this article over in Global Research in California, and they do, Canada. They do a lot of really good work. And they're saying, having lost the war, it looks like Saudi Arabia is trying genocide. Because Saudi Arabia went into Yemen thinking it was going to be a slam dunk. They were going to go on in. They were going to slap down the Yemeni people, reimpose the U.S. puppet ruler, and they'd be out and back home in time for dinner. Didn't work out that way. They're stuck in it. It's another quagmire. So it looks like what they're trying is just starving the entire country, if not into submission, to death. And again, that is a war crime. Collective punishment of the civilians is a war crime. Now, turning on over to North Korea. North Korea is now responding to revelations that the CIA is in fact working on a plan for regime change. And a spokesman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea stated to the KCNA state agency that his country is going to respond severely if the United States tries to change the regime of Kim Jong-un. Now, what they mean by that, we don't know, but it sounds suspiciously like there will be military strikes in response to an attempted regime change. Because now everybody knows that's what the U.S. government's been doing all over the world since the end of World War II. North Korea further went on to say that the deployment and military exercises of 3 U.S. aircraft carriers to the Korean Peninsula is increasing the risk of a nuclear war. It's some serious saber rattling when you look at how many aircraft carriers the U.S. has, and it doesn't have that many. Having 3 of them all together off the Korean Peninsula is sending a very alarming message. Let's take a phone call. Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, how did Venezuela get in the financial position that they're in right now? And what are the ramifications of Putin or Russia helping them get out of their debt by paying for it and giving them a good loan?
Well, the U.S. has been trying to get into Venezuela for a very, very long time and control Venezuela's oil, to make sure that Venezuela's oil is only sold for the U.S. dollar. And they have tried and failed several times in the past. So what they have been doing is applying economic warfare against Venezuela. Partly, a lot of it came from that oil price war against Russia. Because it hit every oil-producing nation very hard. And Venezuela got hit hard. Saudi Arabia got hit hard. It actually caused a lot more damage in the West than it did to Russia itself. But taking advantage of that, following with more sanctions and embargoes, they're trying to drive Venezuela into default. And today it actually hit a technical state of default. Along with, again, there's an attempt to regime change Venezuela and bring it under the U.S. influence. That may fall flat on its face because Putin has stepped on in, and they're going to pay off a huge chunk of Venezuela's debt. And Venezuela is going to be very much beholding to Russia. At the same time, they're very much aware that the United States was trying to basically take their country over. So the end result is going to be one more country pivoting away from America and to the Russian sphere of influence.
That's right. You have to go with the better offer.
That's what Ukraine tried to do.
Better offer.
That's what Ukraine tried to do, and that's what led to the coup d'etat and Poroshenko and all of that bloodshed up there. See, here's the problem. The West can't make a better offer than Russia. Ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia's doing really good. They've got good agriculture, good manufacturing. They've got a good, strong economy, and they're able to go on out. They're making deals. They're building infrastructure. And what does the U.S. have to offer any country? We're going to come on in there and siphon off all your wealth because our money junkies are really demanding payment. Of course it's a raw deal. That's why Ukraine pivoted to Russia, which led to the coup d'etat. Turkey appears to be pivoting more toward Russia. Iran certainly is. The U.S. is losing the current geopolitical conflict.
Yeah. I mean, they blame, even the Brexit election, they blame Russia.
Yes.
For being able to provide them more assistance than we can.
Hey, and I think Russia's to blame for my ingrown toenail here. Russia's to blame for the toenail problem I got here. Anyway, listen,
that's
Alex,
right.
Got to let you go. Got to take a break. Got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and grab your pencil and paper here, because for those of you who want to keep RBN on the air, keep us getting the truth on out to the American people and to the world, here's the address where you can send a check, money order, box tops, whatever. It's Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. And for those of you who want to call on in with a credit card donation, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. All right, let's take ourselves a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, how you doing, Mike? Hey, Mike, I'm glad you just did that, because I don't do any financial transactions online. So, you know, I'm glad you told me, gave me the phone number and the address now.
Okay.
So, as far as Russia goes, what you were talking about, I'm really wondering. You know, it's amazing. Their defense budget is a fraction of what ours is, and yet they seem to have an extremely powerful, you know, military, and on top of that they're able to bail out a country like Venezuela, when supposedly they're so poor themselves that they can't, that they have a very small economy and all that. And the other thing I was wondering about is, do you think Russia might decide to start moving missile bases into Venezuela, since we're right on their borders with missile bases in Poland and Lithuania and all those other places? That might
provoke another Cuban Missile Crisis, so I think Russia would be very calm about that. Now, the reason Russia is able to do this with so much less money is people here in the United States of America simply do not grasp how much of our gross domestic product is absorbed through corruption, endless interest payments to the bankers, it is a very warped society where no matter how hard we work, the lion's share of the benefit goes to the bankers and to the corrupt. And certainly that is true within the military-industrial complex. We're seeing, again, holding up the F-35 for the ridicule it deserves, the most expensive air warplane development in history, and it's a piece of junk. And hideously expensive. Now, the reason, as Eisenhower said, is the military-industrial complex is all about the money and the power. And they put out these weapons that are really kind of junky, but as long as everybody's making money, they're happy with it. And again, I want to go on back to the book and the movie The Pentagon Wars, which is based on the true story of the development of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. And that's why so much money is poured into the Pentagon, on top of which they keep misplacing it all. They've lost something like $8 trillion with a T over the last 20 years, as far as anybody can figure on out. And in contrast, you have countries like Russia and China that have a more balanced view of running their country, where they spend money on weapons to get cost-effective, efficient weapons. And they're able to get a lot more bang for their buck. And that's why I've been warning a lot of people for a long time. Don't think the fact that the U.S. is pouring so much money into the Pentagon is an absolute guarantor of victory, because it absolutely isn't when you look at the immense amount of waste that's going on, and the fact that we still have not achieved any kind of a resolution in Afghanistan. We're clearly losing in Syria. We're still mired in Libya. We're garrisoning all across Africa. Our military is overextended. And I think the fact that they're allowing people with mental issues into the military it shows just how thinly they're stretched. The next step is going to be some kind of a draft.
I don't think they dare institute a draft. I think they know that that could start a out-and-out rebellion in this country.
Oh, they'll definitely be an uproar. There's no question about that. And that's why they're trying to hold on up. No, what they'll do is they'll stage some kind of a major false flag where our country is attacked and nobody will dare speak against a draft because our country is in danger from the evil Chinese, Iranian, Russian, North Korean, Zimbabwean threat.
And I don't think they think, the American people aren't that stupid anymore. It's not like after 9/11. We got, with the internet, with so much on the internet that we can find out, and most of us get our news from there. I can't see them doing something like that.
Well,
really...
they might out of desperation, and it could fall flat on their face like Las Vegas did. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I want to step back to the political corruption part of our talking points here. Story just came in from gotnews.com. And according to gotnews.com, they've been looking over paperwork from the Podesta Group, and they seem to have discovered that Tony Podesta and the Podesta Group failed to report over $100,000 in contributions to Hillary Clinton's campaign to the Department of Justice. That may be the reason they're shutting the whole thing down. Tony Podesta resigned, then the new CEO quit, and now it looks like they're just shutting the whole thing down. So, yeah, there's definitely some dirt there as well. Now, getting on back to the military news, the war news, it looks like there may be some kind of a coup d'etat underway in Zimbabwe. And reports are sketchy, but apparently there are military tanks outside the capital. And this follows the army commander threatening to step in to calm political tensions over the president of Zimbabwe's firing of his vice president. And Associated Press reported 3 tanks with several soldiers in a convoy on a road heading toward an army barracks just outside the capital. Reuters reported that 4 tanks were seen heading toward the capital. So there may be something going on down there as well. Now, Gordon Brown has come on out basically saying that the Pentagon knew all along Saddam Hussein did not have nuclear weapons of mass destruction, which I'm sure is not going to be a shock to any of you who've been paying attention. It was a lie. It was a lie to start a war. All wars are started with lies. There's never been a time in history where a leader stood up before his people and said, I think you should all march into this country over here and steal all their wealth and bring it back and give it to me. And a lot of you are going to die, and a lot of you are going to be crippled, but hey, it'll be a fun thing to do, right? Be laughed off the podium or deposed. Every leader that wants to initiate a war has to lie and deceive their own people into it. Has to create a situation in which war looks like the only reasonable choice that they can make. Hitler did it at Gleiwitz. Roosevelt did it at Pearl Harbor. And I think, given the rush to war with all these countries all over, there may be something like that in the offing in the near future. And obviously next week being Thanksgiving, you've got the Macy's parade, you've got all the football games. There could be a huge explosion someplace. Oh, it was those gosh darn North Korean, Iranian, Russian, Chinese, Turkish, whoever doing it. Because they're not going to get the American people to go along with more wars, let alone a draft, without doing something that they think will scare the American people so badly that they'll stop thinking and they'll just say, save me from the evil enemy, Mr. Government. So we have to be vigilant for that. Now, as you know, over in Great Britain, there was this Priti Patel who was forced to resign as Britain's international aid minister. When it came on out, she was having secret meetings with Israeli officials during what she claimed was a family holiday. And, of course, there's been a documentary that recently aired in Britain about Britain's Israel lobby. And so bit by bit, the Israel lobby is being dragged into the light. And more British people are starting to say, hey, wait a minute. We're supposed to be running this country. Our government's supposed to be running this country. Now, the honorary president of the Conservative Friends of Israel, Lord Pollack, claims to have recruited 4/5 of conservative MPs and almost every single government minister to a group whose explicit goal is to advance Israeli interests in Britain. And, of course, Theresa May is regarded as one of Israel's more fervent supporters in Europe, which may be one of the reasons why her approval numbers are heading on down. But there should be cause for public indignation. No other foreign state enjoys such unabashed, high-level political support in Britain, and for that matter, the United States of America. So, in Britain as in the United States, the official apparatus turns a blind eye to all of this tampering. Just like we have here in the United States, where Russia today has to register as a foreign agent, but AIPAC does not. Russia is accused without any proof of interfering with our domestic politics, but Israel does it all the time, and that's supposed to be okay. I don't think so. Now, the U.S. Air Force has now officially declared space a new warfighting domain. Now, the timing is a little odd because the new military budget did not include funding to officially start Space Command, which they've been talking about for a very, very long time. And again, I think this would be a horrendous mistake to take warfighting into low Earth orbit, because all it's going to take is a few massive explosions destroying satellites, destroying space stations, and you're going to have all this debris orbiting around the Earth, smashing up other satellites, which will turn into more orbiting debris, smashing up other satellites. It could be a domino effect that would render low Earth orbit too dangerous to fly through. We are just now getting on out into space, to the outer planets. Voyager's already on its way outside the solar system, and we could, with this foolhardy idea of turning space into a new warfighting area, literally lock ourselves back onto Earth, a pre-space age condition. No communication satellites, no TV satellites. Yes, the ones up there in geosynchronous orbit would be safe, but they're going to wear out eventually. And if we can't launch replacements because they're going to be shotgunned on the way up through the lower levels of orbital space, it's all going to be over. Another example of U.S. military training and preparedness. Apparently, a U.S. Navy crewman was hospitalized after he was hit by a plane being towed on the flight deck of the USS Carl Vinson. Apparently, they had to helicopter the guy from the San Diego-based aircraft carrier to Scripps Memorial Hospital. So I guess it was a serious, serious injury. All right, let's take a phone call here. Daniel in Oklahoma City. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to really communicate to the listeners about this. There's these sealed indictments that are happening right now. You have Hollywood, rumor after rumor and accusation after accusation of sexual misconduct, and this is, in my mind, it's going to get bigger. And this goes all the way back to during the election, the WikiLeaks and the Podesta emails. This is real. A lot of politicians are going to go down for these heinous crimes.
I hate to throw cold water. I hate to throw cold water on your enthusiasm. A lot of indictments are handed down sealed. We don't know what's in those indictments. We don't even really know who most of them are actually against. And a lot of people are trying to make a big deal over all these sealed indictments, saying that this is proof that there's finally going to be a prosecution. I don't think so. Until they're unsealed and until they go to court and charges are filed, there's nothing there. And I don't want you to get your hopes up prematurely only to have them dashed a little bit further down the road. It's like this thing with Sessions where I'm still seeing all these articles out here where Judge Napolitano's out there about how Sessions is going to get a special counsel to investigate the Clinton Foundation Uranium One. And yet today in his hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee, Sessions flat out refused a second special counsel looking into Hillary. He only made the announcement yesterday to try and make it look like he's unbiased. And so I'm sorry. I would like to see it happen. I don't think these sealed indictments are really that significant.
Well, if I may put forth a theory, back October 20th of 2016, WikiLeaks tweeted, this is an election, it's a consolidation of power. What I believe is happening is a consolidation of power, the destruction of both parties. Why, I'm not really sure as to why, but I do see it happening because it would destroy Trump's credibility and Trump and his administration to not go after these people, and I see it happening.
Well, I'm in agreement with you on that part of it. He's wrecking his own credibility by not going after the swamp, not going after the narcocracy. But again, this idea of sealed indictments, I think people are getting their expectations up too high, and you know, I don't want to see them get their hopes dashed down the road because, you know, it's psychologically very wearing out.
Well, in my mind, okay, I feel like they're going to ease the public into this, and they're starting with the uranium one, and then I think they're going to uncover that, and then once they uncover that, they're going to go to the Clinton Foundation and what they did with Haiti, and then after that, they're going to go look into pay to play, and then they're going to start unloading the human trafficking stuff, the Pizzagate stuff, because it's real. And these people need to go down for it, but they can't. You know,
well, I hope you're right,
Daniel.
I hope you're right. But I've been a serious student of American politics at the national level since 1994, and I've seen these patterns before where they're trying to make it look like they're doing their job, but they don't. There are still sealed indictments in the court system going all the way back to the Nixon administration. Until they're unsealed, they're effectively null. And very often what you have are these lower downs are doing their job and they're preparing the indictments and they get filed and then they're sealed, but until somebody higher up unseals them, that's as far as they go. So I think there's really way too much being made about these sealed indictments. I hope you're right. I hope I'm wrong.
Well, we'll see what happens, Mike.
Yeah, time will solve that mystery.
We'll see what happens. Keep up the good work.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to let you go. And again, we covered this earlier with one of the callers, where the Army is now lowering their standards yet again for recruits, and they're willing to take people who have histories of depression, drug addiction, bipolar disorder. They're self-injuring, and you have to wonder what kind of soldiers they're going to make. And according to this article, the U.S. doesn't need people hearing voices leading troops into battle. Well, mitigating that, and by the way, I don't agree with lowering the standards, because these are people who are going into military situations with psychological problems. Remember Vietnam? They took the very best of our young people, kids who had their act together, and they sent them to Vietnam, and most of them came back with psychiatric problems and drug problems. So it's only going to be worse with this situation. But the Army may be thinking of taking these people and putting them in rear echelon areas, stacking toilet paper, typing forms out, and freeing up more of the mentally capable people for those front lines, which in a way is sort of devolution, because the military has always picked the brightest, most intelligent to put out on the point of these combat units in the hopes that they're going to be more aware and keep the rest of the unit safe. But as a result, we're literally killing off our potentially most intelligent, most able to contribute to society after the war people in this process. But when war is going on, nobody thinks about the future. Nobody thinks about what's going to happen later on. Nobody thinks about what happens when you dump all these weapons in the ocean at the end of World War II. Nobody thinks about what happens if you turn low Earth orbit into a battleground. Nobody thinks about what's going to happen to the soldiers after they're no longer soldiers. Now, turning over to the economic news, Chinese stocks are sliding because their economic slowdown is continuing. And it does seem that China does have a lot of issues out there. And a big part of it is because China is a manufacturing, exporting economy. And their primary customers for their exported goods were the United States and Europe. And as the economy in the United States has declined, especially the consumer economy, we call it the retail Mageddon, China is selling less of their products. Same thing with Europe. And as a result, China's inflow of wealth has been tremendously reduced, but they're still having to service the payments on all the factories and shipping ports that were built to support that export trade. And that's a big reason why they are in trouble. And it's another reason why globalism isn't really a good idea. Because if you're all linked together globally, then an economic problem in one part of the world drags the rest of the world down with it. A good example of that would be the 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud. If we'd had strong economic borders to go along with our strong national borders, it would have been confined to the United States of America. But because of banking globalism, it dragged down the banks all across Europe and Great Britain. There was all kinds of panicking going on. And the globalists don't think about that. They think it's just going to be one planet. It'll be wonderful. No. I go the opposite view. I think we should have parallel nations. I think we should have a world with maybe 1,000 small nations, each taking care of their own needs domestically. And yes, there'll still be trade and tourism across the borders, but not as a major part of the economy. The globalists want one single planet, and if it works, fine, and if it goes into a global depression, well, gosh, gee, shuckies, that's just the way these things are going to happen. National borders serve the same purpose for the planet that fireproof doors do in a building and watertight hatches do on ships. If you prop open the fireproof doors and you prop open the hatches, it may seem like things are better because you can get around the building or the ship a lot faster. But the first fire destroys the entire building. The first leak sinks the entire ship. The first economic meltdown sinks the entire global economy. And we may see that happen in the very, very near future. Now, even though Donald Trump has pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, China is moving ahead with it. Of course, they're making some major changes to it to basically make it something that really will work for all these Asian countries. But again, Trump is on his way back from his Asian tour. The good news is he's not stopping here in Hawaii. But he didn't really accomplish what he wanted to accomplish. He was received very warmly. They were very polite. But he more or less has walked away with all but an empty hand. He got some symbolic deals made, but he didn't get the major concessions or commitments that he wanted to reshape the Western Pacific in U.S. interests. Now, according to a story that's coming out of Russia today, Russia is now squeezing the U.S. out as an agricultural superpower. And they're talking primarily about Russia's wheat exports are just soaring. They had a bumper wheat harvest. They've got a surplus over there. Prices are lower. And the other aspect is other nations don't want to purchase U.S. crops because of the GMO issue. And that's another factor. And that's why the U.S. is getting ready to wage war on the rest of the world to sort of bring the world back to Bretton Woods. Because without the rest of the world borrowing and using U.S. dollars, the U.S. economy has nothing to support it. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as you know, there's a lot of dramatic changes going on over in Saudi Arabia. There's the purge going on to sort of clear the decks for Crown Prince bin Salman to move forward with his war agenda. And it seems like Saudi Arabia is moving towards a more moderate Islam. They're asserting themselves as a regional power. And a lot of people are saying, what's going on? Is this just the Crown Prince's ego? Or is there something else going on? And one suggestion is that we know oil is finite. And yes, deep crust microbes are producing more oil, but we burn it up faster than those little critters can make it. And the oil has to be reachable in order to be economic. There's probably huge amounts of oil very, very deep in the earth, but we'll never be able to reach it. We'll never be able to get to it. Every time they try and get down really deep to get more oil and gas, they have problems with it, like we saw with the Deepwater Horizon disaster. But it may be, everybody's guessing about how much oil is underneath the Middle East oil nations. But only those countries really know for sure, and more importantly, how much of it can be harvested using current technology. And so there's this article that came on out over at Blacklisted News saying that the Saudis may actually be running out of oil that is profitable to harvest and export. Because when you reach the point where it takes a barrel of oil's worth of energy to get that barrel of oil to the surface, the party's over. There's no way to make it work. And that may be what is motivating Saudi Arabia to start the transition from being an oil-producing, exporting nation to a regional power. Now, we know a lot of these countries in the Middle East have wisely used a lot of their oil revenues to build some very modern cities and to try and turn themselves into financial centers. So instead of selling oil to make money, they're going to make money off of other people's money, like Wall Street and London tend to do. Except there's only so much of that you can do before the whole thing starts to fall apart. But that may be what's going on. But another article over in Sputnik News is basically saying these developments in Saudi Arabia may be the end of the collapse of the petrodollar, which is already being challenged by the petro yuan and soon by the petro ruble. Now, if war comes to Saudi Arabia with Iran, oil could top $200 a barrel, and you will feel that at the gas pump. And as we're heading into winter, what is going to be a very, very hard winter, people are really going to be hit for their fuel oil bills, for their furnaces to get through that winter. But it's a small price to pay to get those gosh darned Iranians here. As you know, people are heavily invested in metals, and you ought to be. And apparently 2/3 of the top primary silver miners had production declines in 2017. Again, there's a finite amount of this stuff down there. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, there has been a major upset over in Dubai, where apparently their real estate market is in serious trouble. They built up all these wonderful cities and islands and all the rest. They can't find people to buy it. And apparently the real estate agency S&K Estate Agents has had to file for bankruptcy and be liquidated. And it said simply the revenue being generated by the business drastically reduced over the first half of 2015 without enough income to cover operational costs. And so Dubai's government is now calling for bankruptcy reform. This is based on a report by the Department of Economic Development Agency, Dubai SME. So the Middle East has this image of being insanely rich, and there are a lot of insanely rich people over there, just like there are insanely rich people here in the United States. But the national economy is in trouble. And again, during that harebrained attempt at an oil price war with Russia, it caused a lot of damage to other oil-producing nations, including some that are supposed to be friends of the United States. Saudi Arabia was forced to issue government bonds for the first time in modern history. And so they all took a hit in this rush to get the Russians, as it were, here. Article coming out of The Guardian is saying the Dubai bankruptcy is a taste of things to come. And even though it didn't get a lot of coverage, it did rattle world markets. Now, here's an article out of Zero Hedge, how the Federal Reserve destroyed the functioning American democracy and bankrupted the nation. And it goes back to cover some things that we've talked about before. This nation was not set up with private central banking because we had just fought a revolution to free ourselves from the predations of a private central bank, the Bank of England. What prompted the American Revolution was King George's Currency Act, where the colonies were ordered to stop using their own domestically produced currency and conduct all business and pay all bills using banknotes borrowed at interest from the Bank of England. And it drove the young colonies down into poverty and starvation, the same level that you were seeing in England of the same day, which you can read about in the works of Charles Dickens. So the United States was created without a private central bank. And the Constitution explicitly said Congress has the authority to coin the money and regulate the value thereof, because the coinage was the money, with silver, gold for the smaller coins, copper, nickel, and so forth. That was the money. And then in 1913, the Federal Reserve System was created by congressional vote, which was unconstitutional because the Constitution does not allow the government to delegate the creation of the public currency to a privately owned bank. And following that, from 1913 to 1971, an increase of $400 billion in federal debt cost $35 billion in additional annual interest payments. From 1971 to 1981, an increase of $600 billion in federal debt cost $108 billion in additional annual interest payments. From 1981 to 1997, an increase of $4.4 trillion in federal debt cost $224 billion in additional annual interest payments. From 1997 to 2017, an increase of $15.2 trillion in federal debt cost $132 billion in additional annual interest payments. Now, here's something for all of you to consider. If we still had the original honest money system, then all the taxes collected to pay the federal debt since Vietnam would have erased the debt completely, because it would have been paying down the principal rather than making the bankers rich. Private central banking is at the root of all the suffering we're seeing in the United States of America, all across Europe, all across the globe. Because it's not a system of banking, it's a system of enslavement. It does not serve the nation, it does not serve the people, it serves itself. The owners of these private central banks have all but conquered the world with ink and paper and numbers and computers. That's all it took. Along with the schools brainwashing us all into thinking this is the way it's supposed to be. I remember when I was in elementary school seeing a little movie about the wonderful Federal Reserve and how great it was and how, it was there to just make sure our economy was functioning smoothly. And, of course, it doesn't function smoothly. Boom, bust, boom, bust, boom, bust. Recession, inflation, recession, inflation, recession, inflation. It's a giant heartbeat that pumps the real wealth of the nation and its people into the pockets of the bankers. And they are so close to getting rid of those last few nations that refuse private central banks. They're drooling over an entire world enslaved to private central banking. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're talking about the economy. Story coming out of womansystems.com. The world's richest 1% have as much wealth as the bottom half of the human population. That is the scale of the wealth inequality. Now, I am not a socialist or a communist, because I think mandating equal wealth for everybody destroys incentive. There should be incentive. For people who want to work hard, there should be advancement. But there has to be a balancing. There has to be a recycling of accumulated wealth back down to the bottom of the economic pyramid as decent wages and salaries so it can be spent back in to keep the system going. Under fascism, which is what our nation has sunk into, that recycling mechanism is gone. Take a look at the new Republican tax plan. More tax cuts for corporations, tax cuts for the wealthy individuals, and now they're hemming and hawing and saying, well, we shouldn't have told you the middle class wasn't going to see a tax increase, but yeah, you are. And by the way, apparently the latest draft of the GOP tax plan does repeal the Obamacare mandate. Let's hope that stays on in there. Now, George Soros, one of the world's richest men, has actually joined a petition to scrap tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. He's actually opposed to the new tax plan. He thinks wealthy Americans, because they have more, should pay more. Of course, he himself prefers Ireland, where his hedge fund is located, because his hedge fund paid just $962 in taxes in 2013, according to Bloomberg. So it's always, everybody should pay more taxes, except me. I shouldn't pay taxes. I'm fine. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Venezuela has officially defaulted on its debt. Russia supposedly is stepping in with an agreement to be signed tomorrow that will help ameliorate that. Meanwhile, the United States tried to call an informal meeting of the Security Council to discuss Venezuela. What are we going to do about Venezuela? They're trying to get some kind of an illusion of a UN imprimatur for a U.S. invasion of Venezuela, because we have to rescue all of that oil from that government that would sell it for the yuan. And to their credit, 4 members of the United Nations Security Council boycotted that meeting, saying that the United Nations should not meddle in the domestic affairs of countries, which is absolutely true. Which gets us back to that comment by Secretary of Defense Mattis that the U.S. is in Syria with a mandate from the United Nations. No, we're not. Right now, what is going on in Syria is a domestic internal affair. Now, up in Europe, dealing with all the refugees and everything that's going on out there, apparently Copenhagen has just been taken over with gang wars raging between rival gangs that have come in from different parts of the world, and they're trying to control crime in the streets of Copenhagen, and it's become a problem of national importance. The death toll is rising. There are shootouts in the streets. The national government is pledging decisive steps to crack down on the gangland crime, but I don't think they're going to have any more success with it than other countries have. Gee, how wonderful this open borders thing is working out. Apparently, over in Sweden, which prides itself on being a liberal paradise on earth, migrant boys are now starting to compete with migrant girls as prostitutes. So there's the joys of liberalism for you. Equal opportunity prostitution for kids. Now, Nigel Farage has stepped on up and said it's time to call on the European Union to investigate George Soros' funding and collusion. And he's out there saying that this is where the real collusion is going on, with Soros and the globalists, not with Russia. And Farage is out there saying that when it comes to international collusion, we're looking in the wrong place. He's saying Soros influences Brussels is truly extraordinary. And he added, I fear we could be looking at the biggest level of international political collusion in history. And Soros certainly has the money to do it. It's causing all kinds of problems. All right, let's take a phone call from Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good day to you, Michael. What is on my mind, I was watching a little bit of the Jeff Sessions testimony today, and they had that nitwit imbecile Alberto Gutierrez questioning him, and this guy doesn't even have the command of the English language barely, and this guy is like talking, well, Hillary is guilty, and so is Trump, but we're not worried about Hillary anymore. In other words, don't worry about Hillary. Let's go focus on President Trump. This guy Gutierrez, it seems to me like he should be deported out of here because this guy's another clown like the other guy, Jorge Ramos. Jorge. I mean, these guys are double knot agents, I guess, whatever. But, Michael, there's one thing I do want you to know, and maybe you can archive this. I just got, for the 2 days in a row now, I've been watching these news network called OAN, One American News. Have you been watching them ever?
I've looked at them a few times. I'm still not sure how trustworthy they are.
Well, I will say this, Michael. There is some very trustworthy because they ran a 3-minute ad today and yesterday about the immigration invasion of the United States. And they give figures, facts. They show pictures of all these dead Americans. I mean, this is the most explosive ad I've ever seen. If Trump would have run this ad 24 hours for the next 3 years, he'll win in a massive landslide. I don't care if he comes against Biden or any of these idiots. This ad that OAN is showing right now, Michael, you have to see it because it's a 3-minute ad. I almost basically timed it, a little over 3 minutes. And it's explosive like I never saw. It's actually telling you the figures, what the whole modus of operandi is of the illegal invasion of this country, why it's being perpetrated on the American public. It's amazing. And I've never seen Fox, no other network will touch this ad what OAN has been showing for the last few days.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I hope you get a chance to see it.
Well, could you send me the URL and I'll take a look at it, okay?
Well, I can see, but another thing, one more thing I do want to say, I did tell you yesterday about this. It's really explosive to me, is this guy, Anthony Weiner, and they were talking about a little on a radio yesterday about the emails. After I hang up, I was listening to another radio. They're talking about the email scandal and how it's been pushed in the back burner. This guy Weiner was giving this information to somebody. Anthony Weiner's giving information out to somebody. And it's funny, they want to put Weinstein and Weiner on these sex ranches where they go on horses and stuff. What kind of weird, perverted stuff is that? They're going to put these Weiner and Weinstein on in these sex ranches, and they're going to give them physical help, riding on horses and all that. What is that all about?
The ranches are a hoax, and basically what it is in this country, when somebody who is an elite, rich, powerful, connected, actually finally gets caught for a crime, there are special places set aside for them to go to that are very luxurious and very comfortable. It's not really a punishment. There are even prisons set aside for the ultra-rich and ultra-connected that are very comfortable. They call them Club Fed. And it's a bit of a national scandal that, somebody who's a murderer who comes from the lower parts of society will go to some place like Leavenworth, and somebody who commits a murder who's very, very rich and an heir or something, they go to one of these other places that are very, very comfortable. And it's another example of the fact that our society has become very class stratified.
Correct. Michael, one more thing. You got Wasserman Schultz, you got Wiener and Weinstein. What a combo. The 3 W's. Wasserman Schultz, Wasserman, Wiener, and Weinstein. It's amazing to me.
All right.
Get away with all this.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here and get on back here. Now, apparently, last Friday, there was a New York Times op-ed written by Rosalind Warren, who's described as a journalist who regularly covers women's rights and Internet culture. And basically in this op-ed, asked Facebook to start censoring pro-life content because pro-life content is fake news. Anything that argues against abortion is now been declared fake news by the New York Times. And it almost seems like there's something weird going on where they're pushing abortion on American women. At the same time, they're flooding refugees and immigrants across our border. Somebody's trying to redesign the entire world, and I think it's George Soros. Now then, in response to the Texas shooting, and I'm sure it's going to amp up now because of the shooting at the school in California, or it was near the school in California. Apparently there's now 7 different locations. This guy was apparently out there before it all happened, had been for days target shooting, and apparently his neighbors called the police and said there's something wrong with this guy, and the police did nothing. And then the shooting happened. But Senator Jeff Flake, and it's a perfect last name for a member of Congress, basically came on out and said that he wanted to propose a gun control bill that would basically take guns away from anybody that had been convicted in a domestic violence episode. There's only one problem. That law already exists in the 1997 domestic violence offender gun ban. So once again, we have an example where politicians will try and sell their careers and what they're doing. We're going to pass a new law when the problem is the existing laws are not being enforced. Which means basically that our Congress has become pretty much impotent. All they do is pass laws and make speeches. The laws are never enforced and the problems go on. Now getting on out to the Bundy situation. Larry Klayman, founder of Judicial Watch, now he's running Freedom Watch, has basically come on out with an accusation that the government destroyed material evidence in the case against Cliven Bundy. And he's basically, they're filing a lawsuit against the U.S. government for basically violating the constitutional rights of Cliven Bundy and the other defendants. They were denied due process, equal protection, and other rights under the Constitution and the law in general. Key exculpatory evidence proving Cliven's innocence in engaging in what the Obama Justice Department called a conspiracy to threaten federal agents was shredded. Material FBI 302 investigation reports were not disclosed. They were hidden. That violates the disclosure laws. And apparently there were 3 surveillance cameras showing that the Bundys surrounded government snipers positioned to possibly kill the family as they were at home. These videos of these sniper positions were kept from defense lawyers for years. In short, the Obama Justice Department, along with the corrupt FBI, run by, you guessed it, James Comey, hid and destroyed material evidence until this obstruction of justice was discovered, mostly by accident, during an evidentiary hearing in the criminal prosecution. Just the last week. But again, that's what the FBI does. They hide evidence. They throw the case in the direction the government wants. They did that back during Vince Foster. Evidence was covered up. Evidence was destroyed. Evidence was hidden. Evidence was faked. Remember the silver gun? FBI agents interviewed Foster's widow. And they showed her a silver-colored gun. And she identified it as the gun Vince Foster inherited from his father. It was nickel-plated. But that wasn't the gun found with the body. But that's what the FBI turned on over, saying that Lisa Foster had identified the gun found with the body. That's what they do. They're not the swell bunch of Joes you see in films and TV shows. We'd love them to be like the FBI we saw in Silence of the Lambs or the Jimmy Stewart movie, The FBI Story. We'd love for them to be like that. We'd love the CIA to be like we read about in the Tom Clancy novels, but they're not. And that's the reality. Now, a little bit of good news. coming on up. We got to take a break here for a commercial. When we come on back, interestingly development in the Tsarnaev case. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the Boston bombing. And apparently there is a new development because a federal appeals court has now agreed to accept new evidence for Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's innocence. Now, you remember how that all went down, where there was the Boston Marathon bombing, the Tsarnaevs were declared guilty, the older brother supposedly did the actual bombing, Dzhokhar just helped him, then the older brother was reported as having been arrested, then all of a sudden he was dead, Dzhokhar hid out in the boat, his throat got cut, and then when he finally went to trial, he had a defense lawyer appointed for him who simply walked on in and said, well, the guy did it. Now, what kind of a defense is that? And so a lot of people have been saying this is obviously a miscarriage of justice. And don't forget there was that ugly incident where the FBI was trying to coerce one of the friends of the Tsarnaevs to implicate them in another murder to make it seem like they were more guilty. And it wound up with the FBI shooting and killing this other potential witness. Gunshot right to the crown of the head. Oh, he attacked us. He attacked us. He was actually on crutches at the time. And I posted this article at whatreallyhappened.com, and with it I posted the graphic I made all the way back when this happened. Because had I been Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's lawyer, I could have instantly created the reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury that would have acquitted him. Because the two bombs that went off were hidden in black backpacks, one of which had an easily recognizable white square patch on it. The Tsarnaevs were photographed at the scene wearing gray backpacks, which were also too small to hold a pressure cooker. There was another gentleman that was photographed wearing the black backpack with the white square patch on it, khaki pants and a black jacket, and he was photographed immediately after the explosion, running from the scene without his backpack. And there was another photo showing the same individual with another group of men, all dressed identically, black jackets and khaki pants. Standing alone, you wouldn't notice them. Standing together, it was obviously some kind of a uniformed unit. But right there's the reasonable doubt that suggests the Boston bombing, like so many other events we have seen recently, was a staged event to push the government's agenda. But apparently, the Federal Appeals Court has said, all right, we're going to look at this other evidence. You just go in there with those photos. That's going to be it. Unless they get another corrupt judge in there, and that seems to be the norm these days here. Now, I'm getting a little fed up over this whole thing about whether or not it's okay to be white. I mean, this really is liberalism run amok. I remember back in the 60s when they're saying it's okay to be black, it's okay to be Hispanic, take pride in what you are. And we have black pride and Hispanic pride and gay pride and feminist pride and the rest of it, but whites are not supposed to be proud. But apparently Sunday there was a New York Times op-ed that were saying, can my children be friends with white people? And the op-ed said, no, it's not okay to be white. And this came from Iko N. Nanka, a law professor at Yeshiva University. Now, you're not going to end racism by being racist. And being racist in reverse does not correct old ills. It simply creates new ills. And it keeps the hate and the violence going. And it's time to bring it to a stop. But again, this all appears to be an attempt to keep the race issue going for political expediency in next year's midterm elections, and if Hillary does try and run again in 2020. Now, there is a little bit of a pushback. We're starting to see flyers posted at UC Davis and other campuses saying it is okay to be white. And of course it's okay to be white. Whether or not you are okay or not is based on what you do, not what color you are. Remember, Martin Luther King said, judge by the character, not by the color of the skin. And here we have all these people who basically benefited from Martin Luther King's activism, turning around and doing exactly what he said not to do. They're judging white people by the color of their skin. Joe Biden, apparently before he decided to throw his hat in the ring for 2020, came on out once and said, whites will be a minority in the U.S. by 2017, and that's a good thing. Now, when we get on back, Biden's under fire for something else he said. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And once again, the address, if you want to support Republic Broadcasting, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. And if you want to phone in some kind of a donation, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And, of course, donations directly to What Really Happened, to the What Really Happened website, are always needed, welcomed, and greatly appreciated. Let's take a phone call before we get back to the news here. Daniel in Canada, I understand you've been waiting for a while. Thank you for your patience. What's on your mind today?
I just wanted to recap with your listeners, if they remember, the other week there was some evidence discovered at Osama bin Laden's compound, on his hard drive specifically, that was that linked Al Qaeda to Iran. So I just wondered if you had heard about that.
Yes, I heard about it. First of all, that wasn't Osama bin Laden's compound. The real Osama bin Laden died of natural causes in late 2001. And so, yeah, I mean, it's inevitable. I mean, first of all, Afghanistan did 9/11. We're going to invade them. Oh, we were wrong. We're going to invade Iraq. They did 9/11. And then Bush actually was on TV saying, no, Iraq didn't have anything to do with 9/11. That's become the next thing. Anytime they're going to invade a country, oh, we've found evidence that they're linked to 9/11. So it's just more of this war propaganda. So, it's laughable.
You got to be able to trust.
It's laughable.
I mean, there's one thing that they didn't mention. There's a few other things that they did find there that wasn't reported in the mainstream media. Apparently, the lost Ark of the Covenant.
Yes.
Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapons. A few thousand socks missing from people's dryers since 1972.
Oh, there. That's where they went.
A gigantic stash of Tupperware lids. Jimmy Hoffa was found there.
Ah, okay.
And one final thing. The Pentagon's missing $2.3 trillion.
Ah.
Unfortunately, it was all converted into Radio Shack gift cards, so it's kind of useless.
All right, that is funny.
I don't know. We got to use humor to get these guys.
Yes, we do.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. That was funny. That was actually funny. Now, getting on back here, Joe Biden. Since he's now making all the noises that he is going to run in 2020, let's talk about what he's saying. And apparently caused a little bit of an upset. This is being reported over at Domigood.com, where basically when Biden made an unplanned appearance at the Glamour Women of the Year Live Summit in Brooklyn Monday morning, and the former vice president of the U.S. was interviewed by the magazine's editor-in-chief, Cindy Liev, during which she asked him about sexual harassment, specifically how men in power are defending themselves by claiming they came from a different era and it was acceptable in the past. And Joe Biden said, give me a break. But there is something you need to keep in mind, because a lot of what is being called sexual harassment today in an earlier age was called flirtation. And these things are a matter of fashion. There's no absolute that says, oh, you're touching me, it's sexual harassment. Now, obviously, there are lines that must be respected, but in that dance of attraction, somebody has to make an overt move that says what they're thinking, and they can either be rebuffed, at which point they should turn away, or they get a sign that, yes, keep on going, we're having fun here. And I like to mention this story. Back in the 1980s, early 1990s, we were starting to see the feminist movement really hit in Hollywood. Where women would walk around in very thin tights that basically showed everything. But if you made a positive comment, oh, you're harassing me, that's an inappropriate comment. And so, okay, fine. And at the same time, I went to Germany to work on a production there in Munich, and the attitude by the women there was completely different. They were expecting to be flirted with. They competed to get your attention. And if you didn't, you were going to find that there were problems mysteriously showing up in the flow of work that you were involved in. So these things are a matter of fashion. It's a matter of what women are brainwashed to think they should be behaving like. And, of course, now they're doing don't touch women, don't go near women. And remember, the Nazis did exactly the same thing building up to World War II. They had a feminist movement in Nazi Germany. Because you want to keep your troops sexually repressed so that they're willing to invade another country so they've got some women there to grab. It's part of the process, part of the conditioning here. Now, for those politically correct people out there getting ready to do your Christmas shopping, if you have not already done so, good news. The toy company Mattel has unveiled their latest Barbie doll, and she's wearing a hijab. Now, they did it supposedly to honor Olympic fencer Ibtihaj Muhammad, who in 2016 became the first American Olympian to wear a headscarf while competing. How you could see under that mask remains there. And it's a nice gesture, but I think, like the iPhone 10, it's not going to be a good seller. Do you remember the movie Gremlins when that came on out? And they actually put dolls in the stores of both the Gremlins, the cute little Mogwai and then the post-transition real Gremlin, and they ordered equal numbers of both, and nobody bought the Gremlin ones. They all wanted the Mogwais. They were cute. Big, big marketing disaster here. And another story about political correctness. Guess which common phrase is no longer politically correct? And it turns out it's ladies and gentlemen is no longer politically correct because it excludes those people who aren't really sure yet which way they are. And we don't want to offend anyone. So now on apparently the New York Transit system, all announcements will be re-recorded to use words like passengers and riders, so that they will not offend people who don't fit into one of the 9 billion gender categories that have been invented over the last couple of years. This is really ridiculous. And the goal of it is to get us so tangled up in being careful of what we say that we don't offend somebody, that we're not really paying attention to what's going on in the wider world. That's what this is all about. Well, I'm not all that concerned about what I'm saying. If somebody wants to be offended by what I say, go ahead, be offended. You have a First Amendment right to be offended. And I don't care. Here's another good example. This one's coming out of 12160. The new term is transracial. And they're telling the story about a guy who was born white, but he feels like he's a Filipino. Therefore, he will be treated like he's a Filipino. Remember all those black activists who turned out to actually be white, but I identify as a black? Whatever happened to just liking or loving yourself as you are? But, you know, the liberals are trying to create a world where whatever you're imagining is the reality instead of the reality. And that's a very scary thing. I mean, I like to imagine I'm a very wealthy talk show radio host, but none of the rest of you are cooperating with me right now. So shame on you. You're repressing me. All right, science and technology. China has now overtaken the United States in the top 500 list of the world's fastest supercomputers. China is ahead of the U.S. in total number of ranked systems and aggregate performance. Huzzah, huzzah. And the issue here is that while we all understand there's computers everywhere, laptops everywhere, we've got more computers than carbon-based life forms in our household, not counting the vermin, of course. But the supercomputers do represent a strategic asset for certain classes of computation that are beyond a desktop, such as simulations of nuclear detonations, various other things like that. So these are important assets to have and maintain here. We've got one supercomputer down here on Maui at the Maui High Performance Supercomputing Center, and I got a chance to tour it a couple of times. At one point, they were going to start renting out their surplus time as a rendering farm for film production. I don't know if they ever went forward with that or not. But its primary purpose is as an adjunct to the satellite tracking imaging system up on the top of Haleakala. And it does some really amazing stuff. I'm not going to go into the details on that. Apparently, there has been another major hack of the NSA, even bigger than Edward Snowden's leaks. And apparently it's gone back to a group called the Shadow Brokers, who have broken into the NSA, or they have a leak from inside the NSA. And their disclosures actually began in August of last year, but they've been catastrophic for the NSA, and they're continuing. And it calls into question, first of all, whether the NSA is able to protect these cyber weapons, which should be handled as carefully as nuclear weapons when you consider the devastation and damage they can do getting into the wrong hands. And indeed, much of the recent ransomware attacks and cyber attacks that we're seeing all over the world are starting to use components from these leaked NSA cyber weapons. And the NSA is in a bit of a panic. They're putting everybody on lie detector tests. They've apparently fired a lot of people, even without just cause, just in case. We think maybe you were part of it, therefore you're gone. And it is an embarrassment for the NSA. And at the same time, it also reveals just how much the NSA is breaking into all of our computers. And of course, they haven't actually caught any terrorists. They're just stealing information. They're as big a problem as the cyber criminals are. Now, researchers have discovered that almost every computer with an Intel Skylake and above CPU can be compromised via a USB flash drive. Now, this particular attack vector only affects the Skylake and above, even though every Intel CPU released after 2008 includes what's called the Intel Management Engine. But apparently there was a change at Skylake, and this malware takes advantage of it. And there's a little piece of advice here, and I'm sure probably all of you are already aware of it. If you find a USB flash drive on the ground, throw it in the trash. Because a favorite trick of cyber criminals is to get a bunch of inexpensive flash drives, and every month they're cheaper and cheaper. You ought to see what Office Depot is selling them for now. And they may not have a lot of capacity, but the cyber criminals will load these flash drives with their malware, and then they'll just drop them outside the office buildings they want to infect. And somebody will find a flash drive and say, oh, a free flash drive, and they'll plug it into their computer and not even think about it. It's thought that that's how Stuxnet got into the Iranian centrifuge facility. It may be how Stuxnet got into the Fukushima system. Let's take a phone call here. Fred in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you tweaked my memory. I remember these classified military launches, space satellite launches, in the 90s and the 80s. Okay. And the NorCal fires from the sky. These are directed energy weapon systems.
No, the Northern California the Northern California fires were arson.
Yeah, you're wrong.
Okay, the Northern
wrong, boy.
Okay, the Northern California fires were arson. They arrested somebody. And what would be the point of directed energy fires, directed energy weapons setting a fire in Northern California anyway? Okay, so thank you very much. Let's get back to the real world now. Now, you're probably familiar with a company called OnePlus, and they are a company that makes cell phone handsets. It's a Chinese smartphone company, and they have been caught leaving a back door on almost every one of their products, and they have been caught collecting personally identifiable information on everybody who uses that handset. And apparently there is a backdoor in all OnePlus devices running Oxygen OS that allows anyone to obtain root access to the devices. The application in question is called Engineer Mode, which is a diagnostic testing application made by Qualcomm for device manufacturers to easily test all hardware components of the device. And it comes pre-installed or accidentally left behind on most OnePlus devices. So if you have a OnePlus device, you might want to think about it. And again, we live in a world where virtually everything that we're buying, our smartphones, our tablets, our computers, are compromised by the government, by the manufacturer, to take advantage of us. Now, here is a very scary story and it validates a lot of things people have been saying. This is from bleepingcomputer.com. Apparently, the Department of Homeland Security set up a test in which their industry experts were able to remotely hack a Boeing 757 airplane parked at an airport in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Now, this actually took place in September of last year. It was part of a controlled experiment. The Department of Homeland Security owned the plane the hack was attempted on. The pilots had no knowledge what the research team was trying to do. And they didn't have to have physical access to interact with any system on the plane. It was all done remotely via radio frequency communications. And the team needed only 2 days to come up with the hack and execute it, and were able to actually interact with the aircraft flight control systems. Now, that is a very scary situation. Now, they're not saying what kind of radio frequency communications they were using. Was it Wi-Fi through the cabin entertainment system, in which case it's certainly not going to work at an airplane at 30,000 feet, or were they using something a little more powerful going through the transponders? We don't know. They're not going to say, and I can understand why they would want to keep that close to the vest. Now, here's the good news. The 757, even though it is still widely in use today, it's no longer being manufactured. And the newer aircraft that have followed on have much tighter security over those internal computer systems. But it still does indicate that a 757, like the ones used on 9/11, could have been taken over from outside remotely by some other party. And again, something needs to be done about the security of these systems, whether it's your Internet of Things appliances at home, your phones, but when you have criminals and the government wanting these things to be wide open for nefarious purposes, you know, what are you going to do? Go back to your VIC-20? I'm about ready. Now, the BBC has discovered a security flaw in the office collaboration tool Huddle that led to private documents being exposed to unauthorized parties. And apparently it had to do with inadvertently signing into a KPMG account with full access to private financial documents. And Huddle says they have now fixed the flaw. Why didn't you fix it before you sent the product out? That's what I want to know. And aloha America, welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today here. During the commercial break, Skype dropped out again, and there's a very good website you need to look at. It's called downdetector.com, and it basically is a central point for looking at various service providers like Skype or Spectrum or any of the others and finding out, are they running normally or are there problems? And unfortunately, Down Detector is saying Skype is still having problems. Boy, it worked so much better before Microsoft took it on over. Now, we're all seeing these different home pods coming on out, the little assistants that you talk to them and they record everything that you say and so forth and so on. Well, apparently security of using them has been an issue. Some are using thumbprints, some are using code words, but apparently Apple's intelligent speaker, the HomePod, is coming on out. It's going to use the Face ID system currently deployed in the iPhone X, which isn't working very well and has already been proven that it can be bypassed and hacked. And finally, and again getting back to the issue of your Christmas shopping, parents need to be aware of security concerns regarding Internet-connected toys. They have serious security issues, and Consumer Watchdog, which has called on retailers to stop selling some popular toys it says have proven security issues. These include Furby Connect, the IQ Robot, Cloud Pets, and Toy-Fi Teddy. And they found out the problem was there was no authentication required between the toys and the devices they could link to with Bluetooth. And two of the manufacturers are saying they take security very seriously, and they're moving to correct the problem. But the lack of authentication meant that, in theory, any device within physical range could link to the toy and take control, download any available data, and send messages. And we know there are some very sick people out there who like to mess with little tiny kitties. But you have to be very careful. Too many of these products are being put on out there without any concern for security. Nobody sits down and says, if I were a bad person, how would I use this to harm a child or the family? And they should be. because our society has lost its moral compass, and the attitude seems to be if you can get away with something, go ahead and do it. Now, the other day, the Department of Homeland Security came on out with a warning on weaponized drones, and I kind of made fun of it at the time because these drones are very lightweight. They have no load-carrying capability, and the idea that somebody could strap a Beretta onto the bottom of one of these and send it off into the neighbor's yard was ridiculous. And apparently, the Department of Homeland Security got a lot of similar comments because they've now dropped the warning. And they're still saying you need to be careful where these things are flying and they don't interfere with aviation. But this idea that they could be used as a terror weapon, that has now been dropped. They are a lot of fun. They cannot carry a huge load. I tried to put a camera on one of them, and it didn't really work here. Firefox is now coming out with their latest version 57, and it will be a bit of a shake-up. They have pretty much re-engineered the entire browser to make it a lot faster, but unfortunately in the process, a lot of the old extensions will no longer be able to work. So it's going to be a trade-off. I may look at it. I'm getting very discouraged with Chrome browser these days, especially its inability to force a refresh of the cache. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, keep it, sending it out to your email and your contacts list. Russiagate, Primary Gate, Uranium Gate, we have to keep forcing those out there. Sooner or later, something will crack, and we'll get those stories into the corporate media. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.